say mulligan, it means Jonathan has 14 cards in exile. 2 serum powders were used. He still has an opener of 7, though.
No confirmation if there's any Eternal Scourge hiding under there. But by now, seeing this many cards, you got to hope that there is an Eldrazi Temple in the hand.
I mean, or he just didn't hit a serum powder. Turn 1, Inspiring Vantage. We are off to race. Here's Monastery Swift Spear, sending Jonathan to 19.
You get into some funky mulligan decisions after you've exiled 2 powders. Like, do I really want to keep doing this? How many of my Thought Knot Seers have I exiled? How many Reality Smashers?
Yeah, it looks like Jonathan actually for the turn, on turn 1, drew another serum powder.
Ugh.
Yeah, that card one actually doesn't. So if you don't know what it does on the non-mulliganing side, it is a 3-mana mana rock.
Taps for 1.
Eldrazi Mimic off Temple for Jonathan. So he did hit that Temple on the 3rd hand of 7.
See, Serum Powder is your anti-Blood Moon technology.
Ooh.
It's not pretty.
Because you need the colorless mana. You need the wingdings.
It's not pretty.
I like that. Nah, ramps you into Reality Smasher. It's good.
Yeah.
Turn 3 powder, turn 4 smasher. Boom. Easy.
It is unfortunate that you can't use Temple to accelerate out the Serum Powder itself.
Yeah, so with the Mimic, you see here, the creature base for Jonathan on his Mimic, Reshaper, Eternal Scourge, Thought Knot, and Smasher. There's no Haymaker over the top like an Endbringer in this list.
Yep. Yeah, it's just really trying to get the mana out in front of the opponent, set up the early Thought Knot, the early Smasher, or even just the turn 1 Chalice of the Void.
You mentioned this is a list innovated by Jordan, who's a writer over at Modern Nexus, winning our Classic last weekend. Can talk a little bit about the list.
Yeah. He plays some weird decks. He really likes to mess around with the Modern format. I think he's probably the world's greatest advocate for the card Hooting Mandrills.
Okay. Boros Charm for David. He's going to play that one pre-combat since Jonathan to 15 will prowess the Swift Spear up to 2-3 and swing it down to 13 will Jonathan go.
Now the real test here, what Job wants is 2nd Temple, Thought Knot Seer.
That would be nice. 2 temples is always great.
Simian Spirit Guide and a land will do it too.
His land he drew for the turn was Gemstone Caverns. This deck's really going for those fast starts. It plays 3 copies of Gemstone Caverns in the main. But this time he just plays a Blinkmoth Nexus and a pass.
Yeah, hanging back with the Mimic.
Yeah, no, there's, as far as instants go, there's just 4 Dismember, nothing else in Jonathan's deck.
This is not a very good matchup for Dismember.
No, that's giving your opponent a Boros Charm.
And the deck's not playing anything like a Singleton Urborg, so you can't just turn on black mana. The only source for black mana in the deck is to actually have the turn 0 Gemstone Cavern.
What do you think about this, Ryan? David swung without playing a spell, and Jonathan's blocking with the Mimic.
If it wasn't attacking, I assume that's what he was setting up.
Here's another Boros Charm. It's going to deal 4 and win the combat. We'll see if Jonathan will fire off a Dismember. Yeah, he's got one at the front of his hand. Ugh.
Taking 8 damage to save.
Mimic? Yeah, so he's going to go to 9 no matter what. Yeah, Dismember's, I'm not a fan in this situation.
No. There's going to be a little bit more bad news when we look at the sideboard after this game. Job does not have much he can bring in over these Dismembers either.
Yeah, and you see here he has Dismember and he could cast it and just doesn't. He bins the Mimic. Stays at 9, draws, hoping to get a Thought Knot, something. Another Dismember. Ooh, that's not good at all.
It does come to pass, and I do like that Job didn't cast it, where sometimes you have a card in your deck, whether it be you just misspelled in general, or you end up in a matchup where you don't want to cast a spell, and it's just correct just not to ever cast a spell.
2nd Temple here from Job, but a pass. And one of the things about these colorless decks is you're really at the mercy of the top cards. So if you look at the cards Jonathan's drawn this game, he's drawn Serum Powder, Gemstone Caverns, Dismember, Dismember. That's 4 bricks.
It looks like the keep was largely based on having access to Temple and the Mimic. If he drew a Thought Knot or Smasher, it'd be very good, but you only have so many outs.
But if you have a double Temple hand, you're going to keep it. Like, you have to with this deck. There's no, right? There's once you see 2 temples, even if you have nothing, no payoff, you're going to keep it. That's why you're playing this.
The odds that you mulligan into better mana and better spells is going to be tough. Your mana's probably going to be worse. You're kind of hoping for better spells. The keep is intriguing, especially because he was on the draw, and your Gemstone Mines are kind of like more Eldrazi temples when you're on the draw. It is a little bit more inviting to mulligan.
Yeah, but I mean, I see, if his keep, I think, was 2 temples Eldrazi Mimic. It's like, you're not going to ship that. I mean, sure, if you don't draw a Smasher or a Thought Knot, you probably lose. But but when you do, that is one of the best things that can do in Modern here.
The old between rounds, I had to keep argument.
I think so. I'm going to run it.
I had 2 Temples and a Mimic. I had to keep.
You see Jonathan goes for a block here. Skullcrack will send him down to 6. He loses his Blinkmoth Nexus.
The contents of my hand literally removed my agency. I made no decisions.
There we go, Reality Smasher. That was drawn. He's going to be able to cast that. Now, it's a little, he's at 6, so
yeah.
Reality Smasher can hang back to block. David has 3 cards in hand and hasn't played lands for a few turns.
In a burn deck.
So there's probably more burn in his hand. So here's Smasher. Now we'll see if it's the all Smasher on defense.
To block your 1/2.
Yeah. Yeah, not thrilled. Swing puts David to 12.
Love it.
So you go back to that Mimic. Had he dismembered the Swift Spear, Jonathan would be at 2, but that swing would have been for 10. He'd likely just be dead on this untap.
Yeah, good chance he still is.
Suspends Rift Bolt, does David.
Okay.
Spends another Rift Bolt. Okay, there's 6.
Yeah, that's...
Go. And he leaves back the Swift Spear to block. I really like that play.
Unfortunately, Job's not going to be able to set up a Chalice of the Void on 3.
Oh yeah, those are 3s, huh?
A little too much mana for that.
Well, does Chalice of the Void an Eldrazi spell? He could do it if it was.
For the play that it sees in Eldrazi decks, it is not.
Okay, well, John's going to pick up those cards. So game 1 goes over to David Stevens, and the Dallas Open's going to start with some burning.
As one would expect, yeah.
Ryan, on your card, you had what? Card comes off suspend?
Oh, yeah.
That's a really unfortunate concession there by Jonathan.
Oh, wow. That's
I'm
so
just going to say, you could have checked off that score twice.
Yeah, Job should have at least tested to see if David targeted the Smasher.
All right. So, game 1 goes in the books. That one goes over to David Stevens. We are going to talk about the sideboarding, just what colorless Eldrazi can bring in here, maybe get rid of those dismembers, in just 1 minute after this message. Welcome back here. We mentioned David Stevens just taking game 1 off Jonathan Job. So let's look over at the sideboard for Jonathan. I'm seeing some dismembers that I want to get rid of, 4 of those. So he's got 4 Ratchet Bombs, which, okay, David plays 8 1-drops, 9 he has the Grim Lavamancer. There we go. So that could hit the creatures on 1. I don't think he's really going to have time to hit an Eidolon with it. Do you like that here?
So you kind of just go over the entire sideboard.
Right.
We have some hits that we definitely want and some things that we have to figure out. So then beyond that, we have 4 Relic of Progenitus, 2 Sorceress Spyglass, 2 Gutshot, 2 Spatial Contortion, and a Surgical Extraction. Your only 2 cards that are actually just good in the matchup are those Spatial Contortions.
Right, because those will hit all 13 of David's creatures. It costs 2. That's pretty easy.
Right, and then you just kind of rule out the ones that are worst. Obviously, Surgical Extraction doesn't play against Burn. It both costs life and doesn't meaningfully disrupt the game plan.
Gutshot literally only hits Grim Lavamancer. That's horrible.
Yeah, also costs life. Sorceress Spyglass, you're not going to name anything in this deck unless you're just trying to hit a fetch land, but even that's pretty ambitious.
So Relic, if you have so there's 4 dismembers we need to board out, and there's only 2 contortions. Maybe 2 relics come in because, hey, that's better than a dismember. Shrug.
Yeah. I think that you might go Ratchet Bomb on the play because you're more likely to have it matter, and then Relic on the draw because it just replaces itself.
Yeah, I guess on the play, turn 2 Ratchet Bomb, tap, get a counter. It means on turn 3 I can sweep your 1-drops. That's still pretty slow, but maybe acceptable.
Right. You can cast it on turn 1 if you have a Spirit Guide.
Oh, that's not what I want to be doing with my Spirit Guides.
I agree.
You're right. Do you want, and then I guess, are there any other cards in the main? So we're looking at these Ratchet Bombs and Relics as kind of the Shrug, I guess, cards to board in. Is there anything else in the main that's so bad that you might bring in more of them, other than the dismembers?
Chalice of the Void is kind of dicey in the matchup, but I think it's worth having.
Yeah, if we're talking about powering something out
if you want to see me a Spirit Guide a card on turn 1, Chalice is a lot better than Ratchet Bomb.
Yeah. I think Chalice of the Void, and this is my own experience from playing big mana decks. I think a lot of players really like Chalice of the Void in this matchup, and I think it is very overrated against Burn.
I agree with both of those statements. And the rest of the deck is just creatures. The rest of the deck's just fine. Yeah,
the problem is that if you put it on 1 against them, it's actually not great because they usually have, if they play their Goblin Guide and then you Chalice on 1, you're just not hitting enough cards. If you can stick a Chalice on 2, it's incredible.
Yes.
However,
take some time.
Good luck.
Right.
Job has gone through 2 serum powders so far. David Stevens, if we go to game 3, we'll talk about sideboard more. Blood Moon and Ensnaring Bridge look like the big wins here.
Yeah, Blood Moon makes it very difficult for Job to cast spells.
All right, we'll go on to the match though. Jonathan, so we have 2 serum powders off in exile. So 14 cards there. Not sure if we saw an Eternal Scourge. I believe we haven't again.
Notably, Scourge would have made Job's game 1 hand a lot better. Because then it wouldn't have just been Mimic, do nothing for literally the rest of the game. It would have been Mimic, Scourge, attack for 3. I have a good blocker for your Swift Spear.
Turn 1, or you just race. Turn 1 Mimic, turn 2, turn 2 Scourge, hit you for 3. This is fine.
Yep.
At that point, he probably is enough ahead in the race where he could have dismembered the Swift Spear.
Exactly, yeah, you might have had that window.
And then when he drew the Smasher, it would have won.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of unlucky that he went through, 14 cards and there wasn't a Scourge in the mix.
I'm going to look here. Is there an Eternal Scourge?
And I think that right now what he's actually doing is reviewing those exiled cards and seeing whether he wants to mulligan. How much of the stuff that I want to mulligan into is still actually in my deck? Yeah,
so there's this thing. Once your deck is... Oh, it looks like another Serum Powder.
Okay.
So, yeah, what you have to decide then is... You do some calculations on just the density and counts left in your deck. Your deck is a different... Once you're 21 cards in exile, you only have 39 left in your deck. You're playing a fundamentally different deck at this point. As far as like lands, spells, threats, it's weird.
And the big check is how many Eldrazi temples are still here. It's tough to keep a hand that does not have that card.
Smasher, Chalice, Temple, Powder. All 4 Serum Powders were exiled, so Jonathan's not going to draw any of those.
Ooh, that looks like a Scourge in the mix.
Eternal Scourge does look like it's been exiled. Okay, so this is one of the cool parts about this build. Eternal Scourge, you may cast it from exile. That first line is what we're talking about. 3/3 for 3, not that impressive on the stats, but when it's just an extra card in your hand, I'm pretty in.
Yep.
When it becomes a target of anything, you exile it. Now, keep in mind that David generally won't remove it, and actually the one card removal spell he does play, Searing Blaze, it still deals the damage to Jonathan when it's targeted.
Yeah, Joe would take the damage. He would at least get to exile the Scourge and be able to recast it. But the downside is he would take the damage for it.
Yeah, so when you play to this card, sometimes like in Limited, the ability of it exiles when it's targeted is a drawback. In Constructed, it's actually a pretty decent... I'm not even sure that second line's a drawback.
This was actually one of the cards that put Scred Red on the map initially.
Yeah.
They played Eternal Scourge plus Relic of Progenitus, and that actually gave them game against the control decks.
Yeah, that was neat.
And that's something that you see the potential option out of the sideboard for Job. Because he does have the relics there. They're not main deck.
Ryan, with Jonathan on the play, does he board out any of these Gemstone Caverns, or they always stay in?
You can trim it. Again, this is a matchup where what he's bringing in is pretty bad. You want to make sure you hit your land drops. You do have to be mindful, not only that you don't get to exile it when you're on the play, but it's also a legendary land. So when you play your second copy, you have to bin one of those. So you just have this land that taps for colorless, and you can't control 2 of them.
So I'm interesting. I didn't realize it was legendary right away, because when I've played the card, I like to play the Miser's one of Gemstone Caverns. I've never actually done I'm playing 3 Gemstone Caverns.
Yep. Life is a little bit different when you're playing a deck that can't cast colored spells. You're more limited on what you can actually do.
Can Gemstone Caverns tap for colorless mana?
When you don't have it with a luck counter or whatever counter it gets, it can always tap for colorless.
But with the luck counter, it actually can't.
It's a mana of any color. I don't think it loses the ability over changes. I'm not sure on that.
Yeah, it's
instead.
Any color instead.
So it loses the colorless?
So it's actually kind of bad that it has the counter on it.
He has enough colorless lands.
Yeah. So now David's going to mulligan. So actually, you may be confused here with how Serum Powder works, is because this is... Players take turns mulliganing. So I decide if I'm going to 6, then you decide. How Serum Powder works is that... So I'm on the play. I'm Jonathan. I resolve all my mulligans up until my mulligan to 6. So I would powder, I would keep my 7. Now it's your turn to decide your first mulligan. Even though I've mulliganed 3 times already, it's still on me. So what happened is Jonathan kept his 4th opening 7, and now David is going to 6.
And this is actually an 8 or 9 card hand because of those Scourges.
Yeah. It's nice.
Going to 6 cards against 9 cards is not ideal.
You know, of all the decks to do it with, though, Burn seems fine. I mean, Burn hates mulliganing, but I don't really care how many cards are in my opponent's hand when I play Burn. Like,
right,
that's not the point.
Burn is not fighting the card advantage front.
And it's the red card advantage. If you lose the game with cards in your hand, then I 2-for-1'd you.
It's just like mind twisting. I just mind twisted them for 4.
Didn't cast.
Lethal mind twist for 4.
We have turn 1 Temple Mimic from Job, but there is that Eternal Scourge off an Exile. So I think this time we're gonna see some beats from the Mimic.
Yes, this hand figures to be pretty good.
As long as Job has a second land, it's already a good hand.
Right. Even a Simian Spirit Guide and missing a land drop would be fine.
Reality Smasher's hanging out in Jonathan's hand. And I think this is why I said I like the matchups for Eldrazi generally. I think Jonathan's going to be faster at dealing 20 this game, and if that's true, there's not much David can do about it.
Right. Searing Blaze is nice and all, but when it comes to Reality Smasher and Thought-Knot Seer, David can't even take a controlling role. He's just going to get beat up by those cards.
Yeah, on the play, something like Goblin Guide into Searing Blaze might win the race for David, but on the draw here, there's just... there's a good chance he just gets run over.
Right. Especially since he's already mulligan, it's really tough to aim removal spells at creatures.
All right, I think you're going to get on the board here in bingo. Rift Bolt's turn 1 suspended by David Stevens. I don't think Jonathan's going to concede this time.
No, it's not in a great spot, but I am grateful for the square.
All right, and there's the play we said. Turn 2, Mutavault, Eternal Scourge. Boom, mimics a 3/3. Swings for 3, David down to 14.
Mutavault's a nice land as well, even if Job gets flooded, that's a way to pay off with that. Just gets another attacking body.
Boom, Jonathan down to 17. Here's Rift Bolt. Actually, he's debating if he wants to shoot Jonathan.
Might go for the Mimic.
He goes upstairs. I mean, you can go for the Mimic, but that's just... At that point, you're just, like, telling your opponent that you're going to lose the game.
Yeah, especially when you have no creatures on the battlefield. I will burn your creature, you're at 17, and you will continue to be at 17.
And David shocks down to 12 and says go. And this 5 damage he's dealt himself off the lands, that is some significant damage too. Jonathan drawing Matter Reshaper.
It's +1 on the Mimic anyway.
Yeah.
Another body to keep the pressure up.
3 mana. Yeah, here's, sure. Matter Reshaper, trigger, mimics a 3/2. Swing's going to be for 6. And that Reality Smasher next turn is likely going to end the game.
Yeah, if Job has the mana for that.
I'm trying to think if there's any configuration. If David Boros Charm here and then land 3 Lightning Bolts is still... No, that's only 13.
Right.
I guess 5 Lightning Bolts, 2 this turn, 3 next turn. I'm using Lightning Bolt like it could be a Rift Bolt or a Lava Spike. Mm-hmm. That's... When you count Burns outs, 3 damage per mana is the most efficient it ever gets. So you think, like, could he win? That's the math you want to be doing.
Right.
John, now this one, David's going to cast Lightning Helix at the Eternal Scourge. Now, he doesn't gain the life.
That's a bit of a misstep
that was a miss.
there.
He should have hit the Mimic.
Yep, he would have both gained the life, and also the Mimic represents more damage down the road because of cards like Thought-Knot Seer and Reality Smasher.
Yeah, yep, this was a misstep. I don't think it's going to change the outcome.
Right, I think he's just losing this game, especially because that was aimed at a creature and not at Job.
Yeah. And that's one of the hard things. When I have played Burn, it's like my backup deck. It's when I don't know what I want to play, I'll just play Burn at a tournament. Against unfair decks, when you get behind, the problem with Burn is all your cards do exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. And when the thing your cards do isn't enough to win, you kind of just shrug and you're like, yeah, it's not enough to win.
Yep.
It's like when Hollow One, like a Hollow One deck or like Dredge, if Dredge just like makes 3 3/3s on the second turn, you look at them and you say, huh, that stinks. And then you're like, I bet I'm going to get beaten up by these, and then you do.
Lava Spike you, your turn.
Yeah. Here's Reality Smasher from Job. It's going to be a swing for 13. Picking them up. They're going to go to game 3. And you see the speed of this colorless Eldrazi deck, especially because these Serum Powders, he always has the Temple. Mm-hmm. David was left without anything he could do.
Right. And Job was in a commanding position, even without getting to that Smasher point. Just being able to curve Mimic into the 3/3s and Matter Reshaper, that actually just put him significantly far ahead. He had a good beatdown plan just with that. It kind of shows the power of Eldrazi Temple. The spells don't even need to be particularly good if you're cheating on mana.
All right, well, we're going to go over to David's sideboard when we come back in just a minute with the conclusion of the match. All right, back to the match. David Stevens and Jonathan Job. Job, with colorless Eldrazi, Serum powders his way to a blisteringly fast start. So you mentioned on David's sideboard, okay, Blood Moon and Ensnaring Bridge are both excellent against Eldrazi. If he can survive to land one of those, it's going to turn off Jonathan's deck, and Jonathan has very few answers to either card.
Right, yeah, the only thing he's going to have is if he has Ratchet Bombs happening post-sideboard. But on David's side, he does have a few other options to consider as well. You know, the Blood Moon and the Ensnaring Bridge, they're a lot better on the play. You can try to cheese with both of them in a matchup like this. And we have not seen a Chalice of the Void yet, but Destructive Revelry is a card that you can consider in a matchup where you expect your opponent might have some artifacts.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess there's that. I mean, the other ones, I mean, Serum Powder is the only other artifact.
If we have to protect something against a Ratchet Bomb, say we want to protect an Ensnaring Bridge, you fight that fight.
Yeah, he's got 2 extra Skull Cracks in his sideboard, and he actually, yeah, he had 2 main, and those are the last 2. He would board those in. I'd actually be surprised if he boarded them. I guess like Grim Lavamancer's not very good, but when he's boarding in those 3 mana Haymakers, that to me feels like what's going to come in here.
Yeah, and the Lavamancer also, it's kind of reasonable in this matchup just to keep Mimics under wraps.
Okay, I could see that.
And if you have to deal with a Thought-Knot Seer, Lavamancer plus Searing Blaze is the ideal configuration.
So maybe it's like Eidolon the Great Revel's bad here?
It's a little mopey. It gets a lot better on the play, but on the draw, it's certainly one that you don't care if you have in your deck.
I guess Jonathan's threats also when he starts making Thought-Knots, those don't trigger.
Yeah, Job just casts big spells, takes no damage. You cast little spells and take damage.
Fair. So how much can David rely on the 3 mana cards? Like, can you keep a hand that's like, so normally in Burn, if you keep, let's say a 5-land hand, you have to ship them all. If he had something like Goblin Guide, 5 lands, and Snaring Bridge, can David keep that?
It's tough to empty your hand when you're full up on lands.
Okay.
Like a 3-lander with enough 1s, you can certainly do it. But the thing is, Job has large creatures, but he also has some little ones. He has those Eldrazi Mimics. He has like Blinkbot Nexus and Mutavault.
What about like Blood Moon? Let's say I had to give you that same hand, but replace the bridge with Blood Moon.
On the play, it's possible.
Yeah, like how much is Blood Moon an inconvenience, or is it just like a stone cold lock here?
It seems like Blood Moon mostly does a good job of beating Job's bad hands. His good hands are just kind of out in front of it.
I mean the double temple hands. If I goes, he could like go temple, turn 2 Thought Knot, will just take the Blood Moon, and then you lose.
Yeah, if I go turn 1 Mimic, turn 2 Eternal Scourge, or even Matter Reshaper, and you just are doing nothing on turn 1 or 2, or even if I'm on the draw and you say turn 3 Blood Moon, and I just have 5 power creatures on the battlefield, if you didn't check those as well, you're kind of in trouble.
So David has kept. Jonathan has mulliganed the legitimate way. So he's going to 6. Now, keep in mind Serum Powder. Anytime you could mulligan, you may remove it from your hand and draw that many cards, which means if he looks at a 6-card hand here with Serum Powder, he can use a powder, but it'll be drawing a new 6, not a 7.
Correct. You ever Serum Powdered a 1-card hand?
Just Serum Powder? I mean, if you're mulliganing to 1 and the 1-card hand's Serum Powder, I'm going to mulligan it. I haven't personally, but I think every time that's available to me, I will take it.
There's a commonly thrown around joke in Magic. Players talk about mulliganing to 0, but it's never correct to go below 1. Unless you drew your Progenitus.
Once you say never, then I'm like, of course,
then you're going to be pedantic about it and come up with something stupid.
Come up, yep, that's exactly it.
But typically,
I want to hear that from people. Tweet at Ryan. One-card hands that you would mulligan.
Give me your stupid corner cases.
Do it. Any 1-card hand that you think is correct to mulligan, Ryan wants to know what that 1 card is.
Bearing in mind that I already said Progenitus, and that covers Crater of Behemoth. I don't want to hear any of these elf hands.
Your 1-card hand that you'd ship. That's correct to ship.
If I had a 1-card hand with elves, I would just concede. I just wouldn't even play the game.
No, you could have like Glimpse.
Yeah.
It's like, if your hand is like Nettle Sentinel, you're like, if I draw a Glimpse and like Birchlow Rangers, this might work.
You do get to scry, so anything could happen.
All right, Jonathan's kept on 6, no Serum Powder, scries to the bottom. But does have, is that Gemstone Cavern? Ooh, and Simian Spirit Guide. I like this.
There's some tension when you have both of these cards.
Yeah.
You kind of want to exile the Simian Spirit Guide to
No,
the
no,
cavern,
no.
or try to cast something really stupid on turn
if you exile
1.
everything else and you just have one card, that card's going to win you the game.
It's kind of, you might see
Cavern.
Job doing what's very similar to Mulliganing to 1 or 2.
Nice. He's going to keep Mimic. It's going to get rid of Mimic. Oh, he has Chalice of the Void.
That's a nice one
And
to have.
Simian Spirit Guide. So what I want to see is he going to make a turn 1 Chalice for 1, or is he with the Spirit Guide and a land and Cavern going to try to power out Chalice for 2 very early? Because that Chalice for 2 is really good against burn.
I think that the big test is going to be if David has a 1-mana creature or not.
If it's Goblin Guide, and then he'll draw Jonathan a land, then he'll go like turn 2 land, turn 1 a land, and he'll make a turn 2 Chalice for 2. That could win.
So Chalice on 1 is just more powerful if David doesn't have a creature already. So if there's no creature, it's tempting to just Chalice on 1. But once there is a creature, Chalice on 2 becomes more impactful.
If his hand is a 6-card hand or a 5-card hand because he made Gemstone Cavern, I don't think he can Chalice for 1. Like, he needs a card that's like Chalice for 1 is like a 2-for-1 against burn. You know, if you're stranding 2 cards in their hand, that's about what you can expect. And I think because Jonathan has taken 2 mulligans here, basically, a 2-for-1's not good enough. I think he needs a 4-for-1 or a 5-for-1. I think he needs to go for Chalice for 2. He needs a play that's big.
I think that the turn 1 creature is a big test, though.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Here we'll see if David has something on turn 1. Goblin Guide. Mimic on top for Jonathan. Goes to 18.
See, if you Chalice on 2, you turn off your Eldrazi Mimics.
Yeah, that's a thing. But no, you get a turn here to play one of them.
Yes.
You play 1 to land. This one's happening. He plays land, Mimic. David draws him another land, and then he goes land, Spirit Guide, Chalice on 2, get you.
Then you just kind of hope it's good enough.
Or he's going to Spirit Guide out Chalice on 1.
No land, it looks
okay,
like.
Well, that makes fair enough. Okay, that wasn't. Then if you don't have a second land in hand, I don't think you can really make any other play.
Yep.
Another fetch land here for David. And you saw that last turn, David fetched up his basic mountain, showing some respect for his own life points after how game 2 went.
You want to get that basic in case he blood moons.
The basic mountain.
there's Blood Moon.
There you go.
Yeah, funny thing about boarding in Blood Moon in your burn deck is that the basic mountain is the only basic that you play.
Yeah.
So you do shut off access to some of your own spells.
Yeah, that's fine. You only board it in when it's real good. It's so rude when burn boards in Blood Moon.
Well, it's kind of funny. Job has Chalice on 1. If David cast a Blood Moon, he's kind of like putting himself under Chalice on 2 as well. Because
he is playing the Boros Charm, Lightning Helix, Atarka's Command. You know, there's some penalty.
There's a lot of 2s that would shut off.
Guide swings in, draws. Ooh, is that Scavenger Ground?
It is.
All right. Jonathan down to 16 as well.
That's a nice touch for the colorless Eldrazi deck. Not in this matchup, obviously, but just the main deck, easy access graveyard haze.
Yeah, I'm in. 2 mana. Looks like we're seeing Eidolon from David. I wasn't sure if this would be in post sideboard, but it is good here. Draw. Looks like Thought-Knot Seer for Job.
Little ways off that. But the Mimic is reasonable to try to absorb some damage here.
Yeah, he has Mimic Battery Shaper, so if he can keep hitting these lands, that'll play well. He's going to pass, which makes me think we might be looking at a Spatial Contortion.
All right, that's a nice one as well. That's more guaranteed.
Yeah, and David should suspect it too, because he knows there's a Mimic in Jonathan's hand that just wasn't cast. The guide showed him Mimic a couple turns ago.
Steven's shocking for a 3rd mana source. Now, he's either Chalice checking Job, forgot about the Chalice, or as a 3-mana spell. It's one of those three things.
I like Chalice. When you have an Eidolon in play, Chalice checking is so bad.
I will take 2 damage. And Lava Spike you. Oh, it's countered.
All right, there's the land. Wastes into Jonathan's hand to swing for 4. And yes, here is the Spatial Contortion. So Jonathan still takes 4, and David's probably happy to see this get cast.
Yeah, it gets some damage in either way.
See, now he can Chalice check Jonathan.
Yeah, without having to pay life.
Yeah. So Jonathan takes 2, goes to 14. This is off the Eidolon.
It looks like David has an Atarka's Command in hand, but it does not make the Eidolon big enough. It only makes it a 3/3.
If he had Titan strength at Tarka's command, you'd get him good.
Well, assuming the Titan strength would have resolved.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here.
And he just says go. It's Jonathan down to 12. The guide hit for that last damage. Wastes play here is Matter Reshaper for Job. And David he didn't spend any mana end step, Ryan. What I don't get it. He had an Atarka's command. He didn't use it on attacks, and then he didn't burn end step. I'm missing something.
Looks like beyond the Tarka's command, his hand's getting really flush with 1-mana spells.
That's not how this is supposed to work. The Chalice on 2 is supposed. This is going to teach everyone all the wrong lessons. That was going to be like Chalice on 1 against burn is just great. I'm like, no, it's just working out.
I don't think that Job really had choices.
No, he didn't. But it's very rare that your Chalice on 1's going to strand their whole hand. But David just says go.
Well, you see, the thing is, once you Chalice on 2, you can't cast a Chalice on 1.
It's true. Oh, God, stop it. This is. Well, Job has successfully gotten stabilized with this Matter Reshaper, and David is now just hoping to draw into some burn spells. We see an Eldrazi Temple from Job. That could bring him up to potentially 5 mana. We're in Smasher territory. We know he has a Thought Knot.
Yeah. Job's going to be turning the corner really quick here. He's at 12.
Yeah.
David's going to have to resolve spells for this Chalice of the Void with the hand that he has, though.
I believe David has a 5th land, 2 1-mana spells, and an Atarka's command.
Mm-hmm.
And the Atarka's command, had he used it earlier, it could have been, right now it's a 3-point spell. It could have been a 4 if he'd used it a turn earlier. That right now doesn't matter.
And for the damage output on Job's side, you do have to remember last turn David did shock for that stomping ground, but Job's not taking some jabs. He crosses the finish line very quickly. I don't think that's going to matter.
Thought Knot Seer. This should get the Atarka's command out of David's hand. Doesn't want to get that taken. So 3 damage, and then put a land into play. I
think this is a good window if he has an instant for the Chalice check to make it look like you're protecting your Lightning Bolt, and like maybe with a Thought Knot Seer on the stack, it might resolve. I think he just has Lava Spike, though, and that's not going to do anything.
3 manage, pump the team. Oh, put a land into play. Oh, yeah. The hidden mode. Lava Spike, Monastery, Swift Spear. Yeah, none of those do anything. They get countered. They pump your Swift Spear that you can't cast.
Yep. May as well take the spike.
And Matter Reshaper's going to attack. David down to 11.
And Goblin Guy just doing nothing.
No.
Taking the day off. No attacks, no blocks. I'm going on vacation.
So we're looking at David down to 10 on this fetch. Next turn he's going to take 7. Even if he draws the perfect cards here, I don't know that he wins this race.
It's pretty much dead to rights to Reality Smasher.
Well, Ensnaring Bridge could win him the game.
Yeah.
If he draws that, then it could, it'd stabilize him, and then he could draw some burn spells.
Pretty much trying to exactly that.
Yeah. Well, that's the difficulty when you're playing burn is when you start getting behind, you start thinking, what are my outs? And a lot of times the answer is you don't have any.
Right.
Like, yeah, if you draw Lightning Bolt every turn, you still lose. So
yeah, the sideboard opens up a little bit of that, but it's a very small amount.
But Bridge should do it, and I assume it's been boarded in, both copies. This is the matchup for Ensnaring Bridge.
I think that was an Atarka's command up the top.
Yep, says go. Swing with both by Job. David goes to 3. No burn out of the Eldrazi deck. He does not play Walking Ballista, so the Bridge may just actually shut off his whole deck.
Yep. And because this colorless Eldrazi deck does not play Tron lands, it makes sense that there's no Ballista, but that is a spot where we're costed.
And no Bridge for David Stevens, and it is the colorless Eldrazi qualified by Jonathan Job. The same build that won the Classic last week is off to a good start today. Winning both sideboarded games, it is up 1-0.